to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You know, for coming out on this cold night.
And we're on.
Do we have board business, minutes, bills, payroll, all that other fun stuff we always do?
Minutes from the meeting of December 12th. We didn't have any bills this week.
Everything was free this week? Wow.
Well, we paid so many last time.
Yeah. New year.
Caught up.
Close to Christmas. Sale.
Let's see, the mail I gave you. I also put the subdivision regulation booklets. If you don't have that copy, then feel free to keep that one.
Yeah, that's new, isn't it? Or- Well,
Last,
Greenish.
2012.
yeah.
And then the personnel board is considering a policy about succession and wanted input from the boards on that, so I wouldn't mind taking one and passing those. That's the same thing I emailed to you.
Do you want to ask comments now or send comments or?
Send comments to Keith or the personnel board or through me.
I assume we're looking at other towns as well, though, I would hope. Yeah, see what they do, if they have a policy.
Our next meeting is the 13th.
Yeah, February 13th. I'm away the weeks of January 20th and 27th.
Okay.
7 days off, so that means with the holiday, that makes it 2 weeks.
Yep.
Off to be closed.
Okay.
What holiday? Is it a holiday?
The 20th is Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
20th of January?
January.
They didn't teach that when I went to school.
So the minutes look good. The only question I had, and yeah, it's probably more, yeah, pragmatic solution to what you found, about the end decision on the Sanderson land where it mentions the board turned to the decision for the Sanderson subdivision proposal. And it says important areas to preserve and additional design parameters. I agree they're not as high priority as what you've listed as important, but the farming option was one of those things that had come up as being important. Maybe it's just the verbiage. Yeah.
Park's
So,
right.
I mean, it's probably fine as it is, but, yeah, I think several folks have said if there are some lots to be not developed, it'd probably be where the farmland is. So, yeah. Just observing that, probably the minutes are fine as they are. I mean, it's certainly the rest of the minutes, it's obvious people are concerned about that. They look fine to me.
It's fine with me. Anybody else have any questions about the minutes?
Yeah, I think that there wasn't enough said about reducing the number of houses. I know I for certain asked to see if we could reduce the houses on Sanderson Road. And
Right.
maybe,
There's some comments in it from Jerry Portanti saying that too.
yeah,
I mean, I agree, that
I think
had
we've-
been a theme
Yeah.
throughout the
I
meeting.
think we all.
Mark
said
was
that.
beating that horse pretty hard, too.
Yeah, I think we all kind of expressed that, and when we get into the definitive, that's when we'll work on it, but I think we made our point that we all would like to see less houses in there.
I mean, it's sort of consensual agreement, it's in there, we understand.
yeah.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Sure.
So, second. All those in favor?
Aye. Who seconded that, Mark?
Would you like to?
Don approved, Don motion. I'll second.
Yeah. Whoever she writes down is.
Yeah. Anything else we got?
That's all I had. The mail that I sent out before was the response I had sent on 15 Great Road.
Okay.
And all your votes from 2013, compile those as we go along in the spreadsheet before we do the annual report. And the reports will be due end of February, if I recall.
That's an impressive summary of what we had covered. you know.
It only took me a couple of years working here before I figured out I needed to make that list as we were going along instead of right before town report was due.
Yeah.
So,
Is Becky gonna cover for, what's in it, gonna cover for you, the phones for you while you're gone?
Jeff, I can call you
Sure.
and pick up any messages and emails forwarded from me anyway.
Okay.
So I'll leave messages on the,
With this new technology we have now, we can have developers come in and bring,
any presentations.
that, so we can do them on the monitors in the future?
Yeah.
No more boards.
Which
No
is
more
nice.
boards, which would be nice.
Yeah, people can see it.
And no more shining the light in your eyes.
That'd be nice. So we should make them all aware that from now on,
Yeah.
they can electronically do the presentation.
Do you have any generic information that, about what's available and what cable can do for us
For
for the presentations?
just anything that you could show on a laptop, that the developer could come in and show on the laptop, the applicant will be simultaneously shown on both screens. So what I've seen already when the Board of Selectmen is having a PowerPoint presentation, they can remain in their seats.
They can do it
That
wirelessly?
one, and then the room can look at the one behind you. So that's been very helpful.
Did we advertise this somehow, notify?
Well, that's what I'm saying. We should tell,
Applicants.
Marlon's
You
gonna,
can let the applicants know that if they can, we can give the specifics, it's a very standard, whatever the plug-in is for the computer, we can handle that.
I mean, can we post instructions on like the planning board's page, the website?
Well, for the town, I mean, it's not
Sure,
just
yeah,
us.
well, sure we can.
Keith, is this hardwire or is it Wi-Fi?
It's hardwired at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's a plug underneath the 300 banner, which there's actually 2 jacks in the wall. And I should mention, if you ever have a meeting in room 307, now the same thing. That it's also equipped with the cameras, number 1, to be able to televise meetings held upstairs. We want to get started on the Board of Health as soon as we can. And we can plug in the monitors up there as well into any.
and that's gonna do cable TV as well up there too? So they're gonna,
Yes, it would, yeah.
wow.
So they don't need to bring their own cord, do they?
No, that we have it.
With my stacks of paper.
I know. Right, I did. Thank you. Okay, so the 13th.
So the draft calendar that I suggested for medical marijuana had you opening the public hearing on February 13th. So you have to decide when you get through your discussion this evening if that schedule's going to work or if you want to push that off to the meeting in March. It works with town meeting, but it might be a good idea to get that public hearing open sooner rather than later.
Rather than later, yeah. And same thing if we decide to go with the accessory use, accessory dwelling Do it all on 13. Okay. Got it, no minutes?
Is there an opening on February 13th to put the accessory dwelling on it?
If we have the discussion tonight, if there's enough people that
Are
don't move
interested
forward
in
with
it?
Yeah, we've got it tonight,
Oh,
so yes, there still would be on the 13th as well.
Anything else? That's it, bills are paid. Everybody's looking for us. 13th is still wide open.
Yeah. And let's see, I got an update on lots 4 and 5 Chestnut Lane. The owners hired a new engineer. He's going to do a new survey, and he has a development plan that includes 2 houses and some additional outbuildings, and he'll do the new drainage calculations and come up with a drainage mitigation for,
For the fact they took all the trees out.
yeah, for the clearing, well, to cover the clearing and cover future development on the site, so
Okay.
rather than doing it piecemeal.
So Roland's okay, so we're not gonna cease and desist, we're not gonna,
Well, they've already stopped the clearing.
Right.
So now it's just a matter of
Well,
getting
there's nothing
good
left to
plans.
clear.
right,
Can't remove what ain't there.
And they did get the one row of hay bales, well, wattles up, so. Look at that.
okay.
Was there any connection or any stop work order from DEP? Did DEP get involved?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Would Trigger, or would Concom do that?
Conservation was aware of it, but there was no clearing within 100 feet of the wetlands, so their jurisdiction was very limited.
Yeah.
Maybe the impact of erosion is the thing, it's, yeah, impacts within 100 feet, affecting the wetlands.
So Conservation Commission said nothing's, they have no problem. so-
They have no jurisdiction. Right.
Mark, for the public who weren't privy to the last meeting, you want to explain what that discussion was about?
It's the subdivision up off of Harvard Road where the developer sold 2 of the lots off to a private owner, out-of-state private owner who took it upon himself to basically clear cut the whole lot, cut all the trees down, and he just decided he was gonna go all the way to the wetlands, wasn't he? He got stopped just before he got to the wetlands, to just basically clear cut the whole property, and nothing was done about the runoff, or just took it upon himself to cut all the trees down, a couple acres of trees, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, more than a couple
More than a
acres,
couple,
but,
right.
yeah, 10 or 15 acres of trees, but,
And then the good news was those 2 lots were subject of a shared residential driveway special permit that limited the amount of clearing that could be done on those. So that's where the planning board has some jurisdiction and went to building inspector for enforcement on that.
Thank you.
thank you. I have another couple, if it's anything else before we start. Everyone's gonna be around for the 13th, right? Is this one time a month working out for you? Works good?
Pardon?
One time a month, is the one meeting a month okay right now?
So far,
Okay, all right.
it's a yearly event, or
What?
is he around?
That's, the next meeting is February 13th?
February
Okay.
13th. Okay, it's Greenwich Mean Time over there. It's 7:45, and we have a public hearing for definitive subdivision and open space special permit Farmers Row Estates off of Great Road.
Definitive subdivision. The Town of Littleton Planning Board will hold a consolidated public hearings on Thursday, January 9, 2014, at 7:45 PM, Room 103, Town Hall, 37 Shattuck Street, to consider the application for approval of a definitive subdivision plan and special permit for an open space development, both known as Farmers Row and located off Great Road pursuant to the subdivision control law, Master Law, Chapter 41, Sections 81K through 811GG, and Master Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9, and Sections 173 through 93 through 173 through 118, Open Space Development of the Littleton zoning bylaw. The project site for each application is identical and is located off the northeasterly side of Great Road. The project site is shown on the Assessor's Map U5 as parcels 1, 2, 3, and 2-1, and Map U6 parcels 2, 5, and 3. The definitive subdivision plan shows 9 new lots and 2 open space parcels with 3,540 linear feet of new roadway. Property owners, Fletcher Adjacent Land, LLC, and Adjacent Land Company, LLC. Applicants, PMF Inc. and Adjacent Land Company, LLC. Applications and plans can be viewed at the Planning Board and Town Clerk's office during their business hours. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the proposed applications and plans should appear at the time and place designated. The Town of Littleton does not discriminate on the basis of disability. Further, a signed translation of this hearing will be provided for the hearing impaired upon request by contacting the Planning Board office at 1 week prior to the meeting date. Richard Crowley, Clerk.
Mr. DeShane, are you going to give a,
Mr. Waterman.
okay.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chair and the board. Matt Waterman with Land Tech Consultants, here with Doug DeShane and Melissa Robbins with DeShane Apparel. Al Fletcher Jr. on behalf of the applicant, as a representative of the applicant. We're here tonight, as was just read by the clerk, for a definitive subdivision on Great Road, which is just before the Tubing Park entrance, if you're heading towards Acton on Route 2A 119, kind of just as you get out of the center of town.
Can you face that more towards the audience?
Towards the audience,
Towards the
absolutely.
audience, yes.
I was trying, I was running out of room though. I'm sure most of, everyone is familiar with the property. It's most noticeable by the large fields that are adjacent to the Tubing Park entrance. The project encompasses about 5 parcels. It does not include the Tubing Park or the farmhouse, which is on the right side of the Tubing Park entrance. It's 72.6 acres. It currently has about 1,500 feet of frontage along Great Road. And the division of it's about 20 acres of field along the Great Road, and then there's about 50 acres, give or take, of woodland towards the back of the property. There's 2 primary wetlands on site. They were flagged by a botanist and are shown on the plan kind of in this olive color. One, and then there's a couple narrow fingers that run up the middle of the project almost. And then there's currently an old abandoned road, it's kind of known as Robbins Road, that runs through the middle of the project as well. We're here tonight, the development is for a definitive subdivision under your open space bylaw. It includes 9 lots that are clustered in 2 distinct areas. There's 6 lots off of one road and 3 lots off of another road. I think as you read in the introduction, the road length is about 3,500 feet of road. There's 3 different roads. And then there's 2 large open space parcels that would, under the bylaw, they would be, combined into one open space, but they're just separated by the roadway. The open space parcels are approximately 56 acres and total, and that's about 78% of the project.
On your map, actually, you have the other side of Robbins Road, the west side is, or north side, is listed as open space too. So are there really 3 areas that?
Correct, yes, and they're connected. There's actually a strip along the Tubing Park that connects this larger parcel.
The horseshoe parcel A?
Yes, and then that's a separate parcel in here, so there's.
So 3 areas you
Correct.
designated in the map as open space.
Yeah. They're correct, and they're about, like I said, almost 80% of the development. The roads would be designed in accordance with your subdivision regulations, 22 feet wide, standard cul-de-sacs. At the end of the roadways, 2 roads for access for your maximum road lengths. We would be providing standard electric, water, and gas. The lots would be serviced by septic systems. They're shown graphically for each of the lots on the plan set. We've designed drainage in accordance with Stormwater Management Handbook. There are 2 distinct drainage systems, but they're kind of functioning. The treatment trains for both of them they're very similar. There's catch basins that collect the water from the curbing and the roadway, and then they go into a rain garden for pre-treatment, and then into an infiltration basin. And that's the case for both of the primary drainage systems. There are a couple minor cross culverts to maintain existing flows through the fields. As you recall, we were here during the preliminary subdivision, which was approved, I think, early in 2013, or spring. But I know that the goal of the board was to preserve the majority of the farmland along Great Road. Hopefully this plan reflects that, obviously with the exception of the access roads. We have received comments from the various boards, most of the boards. Town clerk did not comment. They said it was not applicable to their department. Board of Health commented almost I think there was 5 kind of standard comments that what they would expect of a typical subdivision. There was no issues. Conservation commented that any work within 100 feet would require an application with their department. The highway department, I spoke with Jim on the phone at length, and there was a good number of punch list type items, but there was no real significant issues. I think we can get into drainage either tonight, later tonight, or at another meeting. Fire and police did not respond that I know of. The light and the electric water department responded separately, and neither one had significant issues, with the exception of where they would like some hydrants placed and things of that nature. The building department did not have a comment, and I know Maren had some comments from the planning office. I think one of her big points was that any curb cuts would require a scenic road permit prior to construction. And then I think we need to incorporate some streetlights, which are not shown in the plan at this point. I know that there's been a peer review proposal that was provided, at least via email to us today. We didn't have any issues with it. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Was it the survey?
Yeah, and there was one comment if we get into the peer review with regards to the survey review. But we'll hold off on that for now.
Yeah, you're mentioning a curb cut for the scenic road, but on 1.4 you describe it as areas of significant scenic vistas do not occur on the site. Actually, you have a typo, you say 2 instead of 2. So I mean, that seems to be sort of contradictory. When the town has addressed issues here, what is sort of distilled down to from the public and so on is a concern about the farmland, which you've addressed, and that's very good. The scenic vista, the scenic view, so that seems to be wrong. And also concern about not having congestion on Great Road 2A. Those are the 3 themes I keep hearing over and over. But definitely there's scenic vistas, and that's one of the concerns. In addition to the curb cut, it's also the state needs to approve the second curb cut too, it's a state road.
How long is the second cul-de-sac from the end of the road, the loop in the road?
This one,
Yes.
NP, I believe, and I apologize, it's too small text. But it's about station 9 plus 0 to, it's 600 feet, and then I know that I think the bylaw is no more than 700 feet, is that right? I can confirm it, but I'm 90% sure that if you go straight through the cul-de-sac, it's 700 feet long. The stationing unfortunately goes around the cul-de-sac, so I can't give you a specific answer. But I know when we laid these out, that we were going from the curb to the end of the cul-de-sac being no more than 700 feet.
Yeah, is that the same if you go in either direction from that same Robbins Road, from where they join, like a Y? From there to the other cluster?
This one?
Yeah.
No, you'd started further down, you'd started right there.
Yeah, at least when I was laying this out, I was calculating it from the intersection of Henke and Lake Road, or Lake Lane.
Right, but I was curious as to how long would it be from that
From there to
cluster to Robbins Road?
I can check, I just need a minute to look into that, I can.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why someone from the public has raised this, and I think it's a good question, is that here you have an additional road on some agricultural land that's also scenic, and maybe that isn't necessary. And I know one of the concerns is the length of the road, but you, I think wisely have looked at the county road there, Robbins Road, and say, okay, there may be some controversy about whether it's active or not, we'll make that actual road. But if you eliminate the road to the right, that
Then the
additional
road-
one, perhaps if that Robbins Road were considered a town road, since it's county and they've been offered the town, that might still fit in the distance parameters.
If it gets rid of one loop, the roads become longer because they start at Great Road, so now
No, but I'm
it's,
saying that segment of Robbins Road is a county road, and we've had discussions about county roads being given to the towns and the town not necessarily taking, but the town could accept that as a stub, and that could be off the town road, not the state road of Great Road.
they're both gonna be too long.
But do you understand what I'm saying? Technically, it could fit the 700. It'd be a Y shape, but the town would probably have to adopt that
It
vertical Robbins Road section where it splits
would
off.
still be too long, it'd be over 700. You have to have the second way in order to get around the 750 feet. If you only have one way off the road, it starts on Great Road, no matter which way you go.
But if the town accepted Robbins Road to that point, it sounds like the left cluster with the 6 houses would fit. I wonder if the right cluster would.
It would still be too long. Even the left cluster's too long. It's 700 feet to the loop. You add the other 400 feet, you're at 1,100 feet. It's longer than it's supposed to be. It'd be longer than the 750 feet. Are you asking for,
It is longer. It's 786 feet.
as it sits now?
From the cut, yeah, based on this picture.
Which one, the end of Henke?
Are you requesting any waivers, by the way?
No.
Okay.
And we can confirm the road links and put those on either a supplemental plan that we could provide to the board or actually on the plan.
Can I ask for clarification, which road do you feel is 780?
Wait, just based on this picture, I mean, you got a scale on it, you can mark it up.
Again, I'm just wondering which one.
The what?
Right
The
there.
Henke, the end of Henke Road circle.
Speaking of the open space, since that's what we're in, the open space, what is gonna be the disposition of the open space land after this subdivision is built?
We haven't finalized that, but I would assume, at least based on discussions with my client to date, that it would be held by the homeowners association.
So the owner, but would there be any restriction on it, so it's permanent?
I believe your bylaw requires that it be conservation restricted and that then it can be either donated to the town or a town entity. It can be donated to a nonprofit conservation type organization, or it can be continued to be owned by the homeowners association, but your bylaw requires in any event that there would be a conservation restriction,
Right, so qualified organization.
which your bylaw requires.
My point is that everyone, we've been hearing for years about how this is prime agricultural land, and I think if we're going to do something with open space, that the town is going to want to entertain the idea of be able to, somebody to continue farming it as it's been doing now, so that's going to definitely be a concern.
Yeah, and that could be, if it's permanently protected as agricultural, which, yeah, is what we're hearing, and I think it's been consistent, You could own it and farm it, you could lease it to someone, anyone could farm it, but keeping and farming is important, and that, I think that's been the main drumbeat through all this, the agriculture. But how far along is that? You talked about 20 acres, and could you, I mean, already we've talked about parcels A and B being open space. Could you outline where you're thinking of that prime agricultural land set aside being? Because it isn't indicated here. Could you outline it on that map?
I think the plan reflects what we're defining as open space. There's no designation of what is or is not prime agricultural. It's, it's just all of that land would be open space.
So the
I know
three chunks.
everyone has an opinion on what is and is not prime agricultural on this property. I think you've heard Mr. Fletcher Senior say that he's been digging rocks out of there for a long time. So again, what we've designated it as is open space, as the bylaw requires.
Okay, so you're talking about left of Robbins Road as well as right of where the...
Matt, could you show them where the open space
Right,
parcels are?
that's what I'm going for.
Yes, no, and the open space, it goes not only behind all the units, but into the wetland area. Pretty much what you showed us at the beginning.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
That's right.
And I think what Ron is referring to is, this lighter green is currently the active, farm fields. I think to a bigger degree, these two parcels tend to be, but I know that since we've been out there, this has been actively farmed as a vegetable garden, or at least it was 2 years ago.
So the scope of that agriculture area would be permanently set aside for agriculture? I'm just trying to clarify this, make sure.
It would have a state conservation restriction on it. There is an exemption within the conservation restriction regulations that allow for agricultural activity within conservation restricted land, yes.
Well,
But there would be no specific designation that this would be prime agricultural or otherwise. It would just be restricted. However, there is an allowance within that state restriction that would allow for agricultural activities on the open space, as well as passive recreation and, passive recreation, really.
Conservation restrictions are written different ways. And actually, Keith Bergman, Tom Minister, some of the Conservation Trust just came from a seminar about preserving agricultural land and developed land, and they specified certain specifications to put in the conservation restriction. One of those is having permanent agriculture. And so, I'm asking this for a reason, because things can change, and if you want it really permanent, you really want agriculture, it should be nailed down on the conservation restriction or APR.
Mr. Chairman, could I offer just some information on that? The town, Keith Bergman, town administrator, the town owns 7 acres of agricultural land right across the street. We purchased the so-called Congregational Church Meadows property. We acquired that with community preservation funds, so we will need to have a deed restriction that is consistent with that statute. The purpose for which the town acquired the property is for agricultural purpose. Nevertheless, there will be a deed restriction document that the town council will be drafting and will bring forward the next 6 months, which it would seem to me is maybe a model document for what the board here is looking for. That is that
That's not,
it would
that's
set
not the board, that's...
or that those who have asked the question about it, that if you're looking, if the goal is to preserve for agricultural use, that there's a mechanism that the town itself is using right across the street as a model.
And we'd like to have a viable, so, I mean, one of the messages we just recently got is if you set aside agricultural land, it really isn't meaningful unless you make it viable for agriculture. And, I mean, certainly we have a farm bylaw where you could, if you want to extend some other property, have a farm-based restaurant, and you could do that. So, I mean, though, it's a lot of your choices, but it's a way of making it viable. I guess that's the real concern.
And I know in some other communities, when we finalize the conservation restriction plan for the open space, they like to see the uses spelled out on the plan, so whether there's passive trails, recreation trails, or areas that would be maintained as farmland, Because I mean, that's, once you put it on that CR document, I think that's all you can't change it at that point, or at least
Right.
easily.
This one's a little different, because all the open spaces we've done before this, almost all of them, Cobb Meadows is a little different. It has both homeowners association and open space. The town usually likes to get the land donated either to conservation or to the town for agriculture or for maybe active or passive recreation. So at our next meeting, we'll probably have to get some guidance from town council as to how we're going to approach this one, and also work with the developers to see how they want to deal with the open space project, parcel for right now.
Yeah, just a comment, when we dealt with another project in Gray Road, no one was willing to take the CR of that plot there because it was difficult. Part of it was a homeowners association, which is much harder to manage. If you want someone to monitor the CR, be a grantee of it, it has to be workable. I mean, certainly rights can be given to the adjacent landowners. You know, something can be crafted, but let's make it workable so everyone meets their goals.
Okay. We can move on from there.
But Don, with all due respect, we don't want to box a piece of open space into one use, because agricultural is just a single use.
But across the street, that's exactly what we did, and this is
Yeah.
a prime agriculture area, and this has been a constant feeling that this is an important agricultural area to save, whether it's farmed by the current owner, sold and farmed by someone else, but yeah, farming should stay active.
So that's your opinion, but to forever box a piece of open space in as one singular use is not I don't think, a healthy thing for the town.
Well, and the state suggests that.
Can we,
And the state's
can
doing
we
such
agree
a
to
great
move
job
back,
running
come
this
back to
country.
this at a later time?
Sure, we can go into details later.
Jerry, do you have any questions about this plan right now?
I like it. I'd rather see something, oh, you asked Jerry, I apologize.
No problem.
Didn't realize you were.
No, not yet.
You can say something, go ahead.
Jerry.
Jerry?
No, not yet.
Richard?
I'll reserve my comment for later.
Okay. Where are we at with National Heritage on this? Have there been any delineations, any determinations?
As required under your subdivision control bylaw and your open space bylaw, we have filed a
RDA, request for determination.
RDA with the Conservation Commission. So that begins that process.
Okay, because on one of your plans here, it has their line running right across the middle. I'm just concerned as to, do we know, are the spotted salamanders coming from the wetlands, going across into the fields? And how is this going to impact where they go and all of that?
We haven't gone there yet. As I said, we filed with your Conservation Commission, which is required under your bylaw.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions, concerns?
I like the plans that they showed us months ago, much nicer than this, but as far as best case scenario for the town, 9 lots, 9 houses on that amount of acreage is the best I think we could possibly hope for. So if we can't get a indoor soccer field, I suppose we'll take 9 outdoor houses.
What about the idea of getting rid of one of the legs going to Great Road if, in fact, the land in front does go as farming or something like that? Would the board
As if it-
consider that?
I like the idea of having off the one spur instead of the 2 and cutting that in half. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I personally don't. I like that idea of the one lot, giving them it's less infrastructure for them, less.
They're gonna need a waiver for the 2 roads being longer than 750, but it's something to consider if, at the end of the day, the board...
Scenic view is more preserved.
Correct.
Yes, what they're exploring.
Yeah, and I think the only thing engineering wise, thinking is to just maybe like increase the width of that one road in that stretch, maybe from 22 to 24 or something.
Can you do the road to the right that's pre-existing, use that one? Is that the one that feeds the tubing park now?
No,
That's
what
this
else?
third leg, which is off-site.
Yeah. I mean, is there a way to snake it all the ways over to there and go across?
Why would you want to? Why wouldn't you just let it go where the old Robinson Road
Well,
was?
because then we got uninhibited land from that road all the ways over to Kimball's Road.
So you want to go down to the one road on the left?
The one road way to the right, go in that way, go up, and then come right across there on the back, on the top side of the, where the tubing starts.
You want to mix tubing park
Yeah,
trailers
no,
with
that's
the
our concern was-
residential?
Yeah.
trailers?
Is that, well, is that, where does the
Seasonal.
tubing park stop?
It's, first of all, the tubing park is only seasonal. That road is only seasonal, just to service the tubing park at this time.
I understand, but
If we're gonna knock off a leg, why don't we, if you wanna go down to one access road, why don't you take the one on the left, push it over as far as you can to the wetland, that way you have one large contiguous field, not broken by the road.
But Robbins Road is still a county road, and as it says in the reports, it may still be active.
It's a
So many
paper
people
road,
blocked
correct?
it. No, it's more than a paper road, it's a county road.
Somebody grows
Who
corn
owns-
on it in the fall. I mean,
Do you think?
isn't somebody growing corn on that road?
I think the road's
I think
actually still
they
there.
No,
farm
the
on
road's
either
bordered
side of
on
it.
either side by stone walls.
Yeah, the road is here, and you can almost see there's a small cluster of trees.
Oh, so it already exists.
Yes, and then that Robbins Road kind of goes right along, as Doug said, there's a stone wall that,
It's right next to it.
yeah, that follows.
It's the left-hand side.
so once you get into the woods, can you still see a trail that looks like a road?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, and
It goes to West
I drove one of our full-size trucks to a certain point. It was without any issue. I think, trees have fallen.
Where's the other, once you get to the other end, the end of your green, it's the end of the Fletcher property, is that right?
Yeah, that's,
Well, it goes, that's the Westford line right there.
That's the Westford line?
I'm not
and
sure
then-
what it does. I didn't.
And
I
that
was
becomes
only-
Kimball's land or something?
No,
No.
that's
It's still
other
Fletcher's.
land-related entity land, and that road runs all the way to Route 110 in Westford.
Okay, so it does have an end point.
That ends, the Robbins Road in Westford is an accepted town road. It was accepted in the 1700s by the town of Chelmsford before the town of Westford existed.
Oh, nice.
And when Westford became its own entity, Robbins Road came to Westford as an approved town road. We've done extensive research. I will tell you, however, that our research has indicated that on the Littleton side of things, Robbins Road was never a formally accepted county road. Everyone refers to it as a county road. It was shown on a few maps, but we've done research in the county, in the old county records, and there was never a verification that it was truly accepted as a county road. So it has no status as a road, and it's just land owned by the Fletchers.
Yeah, although you do state in your report that people may have some rights there. It has been walked recently, so even though,
I'm just telling you what my research indicates with respect to the county records. But even yourselves, you all say historically that was a county road. That's why we say people may feel they have rights to it. But our research indicates that it was never formally accepted as a county road.
Mr. Chairman, members, I apologize that my notes didn't get over. From the police department's perspective, we would prefer, if possible, one curb cut rather than the two curb cuts on the Gray Road. I realize right now, under our current bylaws, it wouldn't be allowed. However, on that road, we would, the less curb cuts, the better.
a waiver might be appropriate in this situation.
It makes sense to just have the one curb cut down the existing road.
If it makes sense for the open space plan.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
that road to the right that is in the white section? Yes. That only is paved back, what, 100 yards maybe?
Yeah, no, and it's graphically shown, I'm pretty sure to where the pavement ends is at that. When you just get past the farmhouse and the barn,
Yeah.
pavement ends,
Back to
and then
gravel.
it's gravel, correct.
I guess, my question is why can't we use just that one area? Go left-hand side, widen it, move it, share it, and pull hang a left right by the end of the green, by the Tubman Park, and make it just one run. That way the entire length of
Well,
that is all clear.
Don't you share the roadway all the way to the left-hand side as well? Isn't there some discrepancy about that one? Remember, we had asked the house be knocked down and There was still a question as to ownership of that piece, that roadway right there.
What road?
Right where the roadway that's right by the house on that side.
By the Dorothy Flag Trust.
The
property.
old house that should have been knocked down.
Right, and will be.
Okay, don't you own part of the road there as well?
Where it's the farms, which Michael.
No,
Cameron
that's,
owns.
that's entirely located on the farms.
Okay, so the road is,
Yeah.
but the house is not.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know the property line goes around one of the larger structures. And then there's a driveway, and then there's just a bunch of accessory buildings.
So the house is in the wrong place.
No, the house was, the lot line goes right through the middle of the house. The house was supposed to have been knocked down years ago because the lot line's right through the middle of it.
Right.
So in other words, the house is in, so that'll go away.
Anyway, okay. Board have any other questions?
Just from the scenic view, I think you've tried to do a good job, not being critical. On the left-hand side of it, with the 6 lots, my impression is that's pretty well screened from the road at this point, which, say the scenic vista. To the right, it's sort of unclear. I know it's going to be some movement of the earth. You've tried to have it over the hill. Might be worthwhile seeing where have these staked out, and generally just so, people walk and get a sense of it. There are some developments, so it's easier to know where things are really gonna be, you can look from the road.
Isn't it all on the downside of the ridge there, isn't it all?
Well, it's close to the peak, yeah.
Now, what's the approximate setback from Great Road to that first house on the right-hand side? Probably 10 inches, 10 to 11 inches.
Yeah, exactly. It's about 500 feet, 600 feet to the tree line. Yeah, and then I'm being conservative. And then this is the existing tree line. So, this is all.
Right, my point is from Great Road to that first house that you're referring to is probably close to 1,000 feet off the roadway.
But did you see, I'm wondering, when I read the report, I say, okay, what's this gonna look like in real life? And I'm having a hard time with that. Are you gonna maintain the trees there, or, I don't understand that for me. It looks nice as.
The plan reflects the differentiation between the green, light green and the dark green is, the dark green being the vegetated wooded area, and the light green being where is either open today or proposed to be open as part of the development. So as you can see, yes, we are proposing to, on this plan, leave those dark green areas untouched.
Right. And once again, the left-hand cluster, I get a feeling, having been out there, that, scenically, that probably won't be seen. On the right, it's only a couple feet down from the crest. I'm just curious to know what it's gonna look like when it's done, since, we mentioned there's a scenic interest here.
So would it help to schedule a site visit?
Yeah, site visit and just put stakes out there just so it gets sense. That'd be simple and probably not very costly.
Sure, if you want to have a site visit, we could do a site visit.
You have snowshoes.
I have snowshoes, I have plenty to go around.
I got 4-wheelers, we'll ride them.
Why don't we go up in the tubing park and walk across?
Right.
Just a second. Does the board have any more questions before I open it up to the public?
Open it up to the public. I'll make my comment afterwards.
Okay. Yes, Vera Cohen.
It's getting skinnier.
Probably you.
Here's Town Road. I don't see why it seems you're not seriously considering Mr. Scott's idea that there be a curb cut where there is a curb cut now. You come up on the east side of that and just go across. It would seem to me to disturb everything a lot less than those 2 roads going up now, or even 1 road.
Well, the issue we have with that is the reason we put that roadway in the first place was just to service the tubing park. It's basically a dirt road.
I understand that.
Right, so that's kind of how we wanted to keep it, so that in the summertime and everything else, it wasn't going to be used. It was just the 3 months that the tubing park was open.
And why is that?
Just-
Why is that better than putting a new road right through that land right now?
Well, there's already sort of a road that's already there. That Robinson Road, you can already the Robbins Road, you can already see. There's already delineation of it, so.
It just seems to me that there's less road, all in all, if you went.
Well, actually, there'd be more road. You could come all the way from over here, all the way across.
Yeah.
you're gonna see the roadway, people are gonna be driving through the field. It's gonna have to be right through the field, it's not gonna be further down, that's on top of the tubing park. It'd have to be right there, straight across.
Yep.
So you'd be right across the ridge, right
So
across.
it couldn't go north.
Not really, because you're gonna be on top of the tubing park if it goes any.
Where is the tubing park on that map?
The tubing park is, that's general, that the lodge is off-site in Westford, but the tubing runs there.
There's a stone wall right along it. Is that the only between this property and the next?
Correct.
The stone wall?
Yes.
You lose another 360 feet of that field if you switch the road on anyway.
Even if you went to the
It's
most
an extra-
northerly
I mean,
part?
just by this scale, it's an extra 360 feet to get from that road
All the way across.
all the way across.
How long are the two spurs now, though?
Point?
How long are
These,
the? Yeah.
these two?
Yeah.
These are like about 600 feet or so.
Each?
Yeah,
Yeah.
three.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference, there's 1,200 feet that you're eliminating there to put in, how many going the other way?
No, you
I can see.
Scale.
yeah, no, this one.
Mark,
What?
you've got the 8:15.
Right, I know.
discussion.
Let me open this up to the public very quickly. Yes, in the back.
Rick Finley, Cedarburg Road. I really like it, and I think if you can get back to that one entrance on Robbins Road, I think, which is basically already there, has a tree line existing, plus there's no wall. I think that makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I would question is that first house as you go into the left cluster, if you could maintain some tree buffer right there. That's the only thing I see wrong with it.
No, I think from a scenic view point of, I think as you're driving down Great Road going the speed limit 40 miles an hour, 45, you're not gonna see Pelimark Road as you would a road that traverses. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. You know, you see a field and cars traversing through the field, it just seems green, there would be more of an impact from Great Road. It's just
I like my idea.
Did you say you had a chance to look at the drainage? Because we'd like to send the drainage out.
And what do you mean with respect to?
Peer review proposal.
Peer review proposal for the
Yes.
drainage.
Our only question with the peer review proposal is that there's a significant charge as part of that quote for survey review. Now, it's something in the order of $1,000 or thereabouts. Clearly, for that price, they're not going to go out and resurvey to verify the survey. I quite frankly have never had a peer review charge to verify the survey when in fact we're required to provide you a plan stamped by a licensed surveyor. So the only thing within that quote that we have any concern about, otherwise we're comfortable with it being passed out to them, is whether in fact our survey needs to be
Survey?
peer reviewed. Again, for $1,000, they're not going to go out and do a new survey to verify ours. They're going to somehow look at our plan, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what you do, but what verifies that the survey is good is that it's stamped by a licensed surveyor. So we would suggest to the board that perhaps a survey review is not necessary, but the rest of the peer review estimate we're comfortable with and would agree to have it reviewed.
I think that's absolutely.
Yeah, that's fine, we can tell them that. That's redundant.
It was line item number, it was towards the,
Regardless, we'll knock that out of there, it's fine. Make a vote towards
how
it
long-
anyways.
How long will it take for them to get
Number 4, I think.
an I?
number 4 on page 2.
Yeah, I didn't have that discussion with Eric about his timing.
We're on. Do you want to be back for the 13th?
Is that 2 weeks?
That's a month, actually.
Yeah, we would suggest a month. It generally takes at least that for a peer review. They'll send the comments to Mr. Waterman, Mr. Waterman will respond. You know, we'd like to give them some time to do some back and forth, so hopefully the final report to you will be complete and say, you know, all of their reviews, all their concerns have been addressed, so we don't want to come back here only to say, well, the peer review's not done, so at least a month would be reasonable.
How's the board, do you want to speak now, Richard, since you want last shot?
Yes. When I saw this plan come before us, I was very, very disappointed and discouraged, because for 5 years, the Fletchers have been coming to us to try to put in an indoor sports complex for the townspeople. Now, what we have here is an element that we don't need more of in town, which is housing and bedrooms, because they cause students and our school budget to go up. What we can use in this town is an indoor sports complex, and we're not going to get it right now because there are a few members on this board who stonewalled every attempt to try to get a sports complex into this piece of property. Now, it's unfortunate for the town, it's unfortunate for all those parents with kids out there that, you know, are right now leaving town and going wherever they have to go when they could have something very, very special and unique in this town. I mean, we have the Kimballs on one side, we have the Fletcher ski areas on the other side. The sports complex was a perfect fit for this property, but there are members of this board who felt it was in the best interest of the town not to provide that. And they've stonewalled it all the way through. I feel very disappointed when I saw this. I would propose that that this board reconsider revitalizing the overlay for Area C.
Richard, were you on another
we-
planet when we had the public hearing and everybody in that audience was dead set against doing anything to rezone that, to allow the sports complex like you talked about and the retail? I sat here and took it from everybody in the audience because Doug and I tried to get that to go through, and nobody was in favor of it. We pulled it because there was no support to go to town meeting.
Here's my suggestion, is that I would propose that this board entertain revitalizing Area C, looking at it, it was almost complete. It would need just a little bit of touching up to do.
We have a-
And if you'd let me finish,
No, we have a
please.
subdivision before us. We
And-
don't have Area C. We have a 9-lot subdivision before us, and that's what we're going to be
And if
acting on. Not-
if we went parallel to this subdivision being
No.
being
You heard it.
reviewed
We-
with proposal to revisit Area C for town meeting and let the townspeople decide.
The townspeople already did. They came out in droves and were dead set against it. Nobody spoke in favor of it. Weren't you in the room, Richard?
Just
Nobody
for
was in favor of it.
clarification, people didn't necessarily come out against a sports complex, such as where the houses were, if there was a sports complex. I don't think anyone's against it. What they came out against was the retail and non-farm related restaurant on the roadside.
Yeah, but
That's what they were against.
Richard, you're totally out of line. What we're dealing with right now is a
we
9-unit
would have,
subdivision.
we lost, that whole strip would have been saved as farmland. The small village retail component in the back would have been great for the townspeople.
Richard, wrong place, wrong time. The townspeople spoke about it 2 months ago. They said no. The Fletchers have the right to come in and
I
ask for a
beg to
9-unit
differ
subdivision.
with you, Mark.
Richard, nobody spoke in favor. Ask-
Townspeople you're talking about are not the 40% of the voters here that have parents with kids.
Everybody who was interested came out and spoke about it, and nobody was in favor of it. So we pulled the article.
Yeah, but we had a small dichotomy of people here,
Richard.
Mark. I'm saying we allow it to go to town meeting.
Yes, sir, do you want to?
Just as technical questions, just so for future reference, okay? In order to accomplish what's being discussed, would the measure have to go in front of the entire town as opposed to a local, a meeting? In other words, from a technical point of view.
Two-thirds of the people in town will have to vote in favor of it.
Because
So
they're changing
basically,
the zoning.
so basically what we're talking about here is that the decision to take on this project, leaving aside its merits or lack thereof, okay, it did not involve the town having to take any motion at all. It just basically what went on in the planning board, those who attended, those who voiced their opinion, those, all right. To follow the other pathway would have required the entire town's involvement. Is that correct?
This has been before the town
Yes,
twice
that
for
is correct.
rezoning.
Never made it through.
Yeah,
It's
twice
been,
the zoning
it-
got-
it-
I'm really confused here.
It's been the town meeting floor twice for rezoning, and it was pulled on town meeting floor twice. Yes, it has.
No, it
Yes,
hasn't.
it has.
No, it was always pulled. It was always pulled.
It was pulled on town meeting floor.
Never made it to the floor.
The proponents pulled it, we didn't pull it.
It was very
It wasn't us.
controversial, and it
You
got
didn't
pulled
hold a
last
hearing
minute.
on it, town meeting couldn't vote on it.
No, I'm talking way before that, 6, 7 years. The point is, what we have in front of us is a 9-lot subdivision.
Look, I understand what you think you have in front of you. This is not the argument. It's a technical, the question has to do with that you're in the position right now where the channel you're following does not require you to go in front of the town to decide if they want to do this, do the project that's been described, the sports center, I'll call it, all right, for whatever, okay? So according to the memory of some folks here, I don't know the documents, it never approached, it never got in front of the town. The alternative never got in front of the town. That's,
Because the applicant pulled it.
what?
The applicant.
No, not this one, I'm talking about the other ones. Anyway,
So what I was suggesting was that we go down two pathways. Let this follow its course. But we also, as a planning board and maybe in conjunction with the selectmen, look at revitalizing the overlay. It's 99% done. Involve MAPC. Put the overlay in front of the townspeople in May. Now, either will pass or it won't pass. If it passes, then that gives the Fletchers another option. Because that
overlay's a generic
that
term.
overlay doesn't change the underlying zoning. It only adds the option of going to an additional type of use.
When you say overlay, it can involve anything, so
This is
that
not.
isn't very helpful.
this is
No,
not what we
are
even
you
have in
saying
front of
we
us, you
can-
know what?
By creating the overlay, we create
This is, no.
specific uses.
We
that
don't have this in front of us.
can be
This is
accessed
what we
only
have
through
in
that
front of
overlay.
us. This is what we This is what's in front of us. We have a subdivision in front of us.
These
That's
guys here.
all we have. Oh, you Mr. Yap, if you'd like to speak, go ahead.
Yes, I would. I was curious when you talked about the whole town came out and spoke against us. I do believe there's around 54 to 5,700 registered voters. So how many people actually came out that you're referring to voice their complaints?
This room was packed.
Well, how many people is that?
I have no idea. 100 people? 50?
40 out of 5,700?
Yeah, something like that. You hold a public hearing, and the people that came to that meeting said they did not want to support it, they did not want to move forward, and we decided to pull it rather than continue, because we had no support for it. I was in favor of, Doug and I fought it, and everybody was against it. Everybody was against it.
The room full.
The room full was against it. If you want to follow the tape, go watch the tape of the meeting if you have a question about it.
I'm just asking.
Everybody in the room was dead set against it. Didn't want to go forward. So we took a vote, and we voted not to bring it to fall town meeting.
Well, it seems like a very small,
That's what-
what you call sampling to do something of that nature.
This has been going on for years.
I know it
This
has,
is
you know.
not the time and the place. We have a subdivision in front of us. If you want to hold off on this and,
No, I'm not asking these guys to hold off anything.
No, you don't
I'm
want-
asking the board to consider or reconsider.
it's not up to us. It's up to
Going
the
to
Fletch.
a-
It's up to Doug. Do you want to?
Well, they're moving along that pathway just to have the board reconsider reestablishing the overlay and allow the townspeople to make
think
the decision.
that's a fair assessment.
It doesn't affect
Wait,
this.
no,
The town
the-
decides.
It won't affect
should
this.
we,
We had a committee, we did the whole, this is,
Don't you want a committee that met about all this?
Yeah, and the meeting that Mark is talking about, the majority of the people who showed up are the large landowners in town. And
What did they
decide,
say?
huh?
What were they complaining about?
They made a legitimate argument in that, the Fletcher's case, they needed 30% of the land use to go to this, the component they were looking for. So that's what we based it on, at 30%. But that really wasn't fair to other farmers, because some of them didn't have, Dan Pickard, bunch of nice right up front land. Pickard's, his brother or cousin or whatever, back up on near near Jenna's house, he doesn't really have a big shot at a component of industrial or commercial. So it wouldn't be fair to him to say 30% of your land, his might be 80%. And I spoke to one of the gentlemen that works for the Farm Bureau itself, and he said, what if we took the price of the land, it's worth $100,000 in residential area, okay? And if we took that and took, what would it be worth commercially? 30% of it would equal $100,000. So 30% works for this guy. Well, it might be 50% for somebody else. So what you're doing is you're giving a value of the property at $100,000, and 50% of it, of this guy, will make up 100,000. 20% of another guy might make the 100,000. Whichever one fits for whichever property comes before it, if it's advantageous to them to go commercial. In this case, it's advantageous for them to go commercial. For what it's gonna cost to do this project, I think it would be much more advantageous to do it
Go
as
ahead, Doug.
commercial.
Then I'm done.
I appreciate it. I agree with you that what's before the board is this plan. But I think it's important that everybody understand the history of what was done and not done. Because I hate to say it, but I think we're mixing apples and oranges. There were 2 applications made to town meeting to rezone this property from residential to commercial. Those occurred 6 years ago. And I believe someone stated it, and they were correct, that the applicant withdrew those warrant articles before they reached town meeting at the suggestion of planning board, board of selectmen, and just general people telling us that in their opinion that it would not pass muster at the town meeting floor, and that if we would withdraw that application, the town would work with us to see how it could be achieved. That happened twice. After the withdrawal the second time, and the basis for the second withdrawal was the fact that we were informed that the town was going to work to create 3 overlay districts, A, B, and C, one of which, overlay C, would address all of the land along Great Road, including the Fletcher land. We were supportive of that overlay, and there was a process that went on for some year or year and a half to create the overlays. The overlays, all 3 of them were completed to some extent. However, not based on our input, but rather, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe based on the planning board's determination, overlays A and B were submitted to town meeting for review as requested by the planning board, but the planning board determined not to put overlay C before the town meeting. So overlay C never had a public hearing where the public could provide input. So overlay C went by the wayside. Following that process, it was suggested that perhaps a rewriting of the extensive recreational bylaw would be a mechanism by which perhaps the plan that the Fletchers were considering could be accomplished. That's where a committee was established, Mr. Montanari, myself, 2 members of the planning board, 2 board members from the Board of Selectmen, some members at large from the public, and myself, although I participated not as a board member, but as a member of the public on behalf of the Fletchers. We spent a considerable amount of time and effort rewriting the recreational bylaw for hopes that that would be brought to town meeting to change the bylaw, which would then, quite frankly, allow the Fletchers to bring their plan forth. So yes, was the bylaw drafted to sort of, address the Fletchers plan? Yes, it was, because we were the ones that suggested that you'd be allowed to develop 30%, it wasn't 30%, it was 5% of your land for recreational purposes, 5% for commercial purposes, but that at a minimum, 70% of the land that you voluntarily chose to apply this new bylaw to would be open space. That public hearing was held by this board some numbers of months ago to address whether that revised bylaw would be brought forth. And Mr. Montanari is correct. There was an overwhelming majority of people here who just crushed any idea of bringing that bylaw to town meeting, and so this board voted not to bring the bylaw forward because it didn't feel there was public support for that. So 4 very different attempts to try and get to that project. Where we are today is that there is no bylaw amendment, there is no overlay, there has been no rezoning. My clients, this is residentially zoned land, they have filed a residential subdivision, as Mr. Montanari has suggested, and that's what's before the board. And that's what my clients are asking you to consider. But I think it's important that everyone understand that process, that there was the overlay, there were 2 rezones pulled by us, there was an overlay that was never brought to town meeting, and then there was the bylaw, which was also never brought to town meeting because of the overwhelming rejection at the public hearing here. That's where we are today.
The only thing you left out was the farm bylaw. We looked at Area C, working with the MAPC, we decided for the same area, we'd revise the farm bylaw to make it more viable. Then we thought, why just C, why not the entire town?
We did the whole town,
So
yeah.
C wasn't just chucked, it transformed because we looked at, the C was the farmland properties. And so we tried to address it. And you could still use that on this area.
That's true. If we wanted to farm this, we could use your current farm bylaw. But in order to do a sports complex of any kind, it would have required one of those other methodologies, a rezoning, the overlay, which, with all due respect, sir, was never brought forward to town meeting, even though the work was done to create it.
That's correct.
And then the last effort, which was the rezoning, redrafting of your recreational bylaw, which also was never brought to town meeting, because I have to agree with Mr. Montanari, the overwhelming majority of people at that meeting were adamant and ferocious about that. So, and unfortunately, I think that was based on a misunderstanding of the bylaw. Some of the landowners felt that they would be forced somehow to give up their land, when in fact, you would only be subject to that if you chose to do something under the bylaw. But whatever reason, it was rejected. Thank
That's
you.
not the issue.
But-
All right, let's
just-
move on.
Just one minute. No one came out against the sports complex, they came out against office buildings, restaurant, and retail, that's what.
Jimmy,
All right, so-
you get last word, Jimmy. No, Richard.
I'm-
No, Richard. Jimmy.
Wait, there's a point here, Mr. Chairman, okay? And this particular topic does address it, and the topic is this.
It's not here.
There's certain-
We're discussing a subdivision. That's all we're gonna discuss. We're done.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
We're
This is an
done.
open meeting with
This
the
is a
public.
subdivision.
In other words, this very same meeting, whose votes you're willing to take, we're overwhelming against something. All I was trying to make is the following point. There are certain topics that come up which have town impact beyond their immediate borders. It sounds like the original project put up by the Fletchers was going to have a high town impact beyond, shall we say, the narrower scope of a project like this. This is a big project, but still narrow. All I'm suggesting is maybe in the future, this board ought to consider that in spite of who comes here and votes, there are certain projects that have town impact and should be, in spite of the lack of popularity at the time. Given the time for venting in the most appropriate public forum where the public has the greatest impact. That's all I wish to make the point.
Very good. I had a discussion with Matt yesterday over the phone, and the plan has some basic changes that we discussed. I'm just wondering if he's gonna be able to make those changes before it goes to peer review, because they're just gonna regurgitate the same items.
No, yes.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna send it out. Meeting on the 23rd, 13th of February. Hopefully, we'll get everything back from Green in time for that.
What time would you like to schedule this?
Early, I'm sure people will come up.
7:45 or 8?
7:45, let's keep it at 7:45.
Okay.
And we're gonna have to entertain an extension, because I don't think we'll,
We'll grant the extension.
okay,
I'll send it over tomorrow, Monday, Myron, I'm not in the office tomorrow.
okay?
Yeah, the deadline is February 28th.
Right.
So we could do that either this meeting or next.
We'll send it next week.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, it was helpful, thanks.
All right, we have a 7:45, 8:15, excuse me. Zoning update, zoning bylaw updates for May, flood plan, maps, and accessory dwelling.
Okay, the FEMA has updated several of the floodplain panels for Littleton, not all of them, but it's the same process we went through in 2010, just referencing the new panels and the new wording. The state's walking us through the wording that they want. So Chris is on board with,
We want to make them happy.
Yes.
And they've already given us the language that they want to see, so we will draft a warrant
that we had draft maps. They'll be producing proposed maps sometime in January, so that we'll be able to meet the posting deadlines, posting requirements.
What? We're talking about pot.
Flood
Let's
areas.
get some out and let's go.
Add some more water in
All right, what about the,
You don't want to leave that.
the what? Do you want to talk about the accessory dwelling? Do we want to do it? Well, yeah, that's at 8:50. What is the medical marijuana first? All right, okay, let's start with our joint meeting, okay. Excuse me, could we have a little quiet here? So, we're having a joint meeting with the selectmen to discuss, and Board of Health to discuss a bylaw for medical marijuana, since our moratorium runs out sometime in July, right?
June 30th.
June 30th. So I guess the first thing we need to decide is, as a town, is it something that we want to promote? Do we want medical marijuana in the town of Littleton? Because if you're going to write a bylaw to support that, you would write it one way. If you wanted to do like we did with the adult entertainment, that we really were not thrilled about having adult establishments in the town, we would write a bylaw that was more restrictive to not allow it, to allow it to the barest extent of the law. So I guess, as boards, we need to decide, how do we embrace medical marijuana? Are we for it? Are we against it?
We do, like.
We have to accommodate it, yes, we have to make it, but do we make it so that we want to see more, or do we want to see less, or? Go.
Could I just share some experiences that I've had on the issue of medical?
See how he held his finger when he said that?
You get this deputy chief, you get this all, it's Williams in Provincetown.
That in my recent experience has been with applicants looking to site cultivation sites in Littleton. And I have dealt with 3 of those, all 3 of whom were successfully deflected in the current round, only because the fact that Littleton has a zoning moratorium in place means that they could not have submitted competitive applications to the state to get one of those limited dispensary licenses. That there were a total of 158 applicants for, 35 licenses. So, and the state was looking to have, to essentially have whoever got those licenses be ready to go. The state's deciding this month, Mass Department of Public Health is deciding this month, January, and for all 3, they understood that even if we wanted to support them, that we have a zoning moratorium in place. We're not going to call a special town meeting any sooner than an annual town meeting to lift it, so we simply could not accommodate them. That said, it appears to me that there is a continuing interest for the future in Littleton as a cultivation site. I hadn't heard anyone who had expressed interest in a dispensary. I heard a lot of interest in cultivation sites. So I think that's some important information to have up front. The other feedback I'd offer is that there was I think we should be very careful about the distances away from schools and other things that are important to us. The state standard is at least 500 feet away from a school or any place where children congregate. That's not far enough. That's not far enough. When we were, it needs to be at least 1,000 feet or more needs to be measured from the property line, and I'll just give you two examples. One of the sites that was proposed was that area on, I forget what number, King Street.
Cup and Cup.
Yeah, and that it was just, you know, it was within sight of the intersection of King Street and Russell Street. And Russell Street is where we have two of our public schools. And so that is a school zone as far as the community is concerned. So it needs to be farther away than 500 feet. The other, another site that was looked at was the horse farm adjacent to the Montessori school. And there the applicant tried to make the case that because the particular location on the horse farm was going to be more than 500 feet away from the edge of the property with the school, that therefore it was okay. It wasn't okay, because you could, and I told them, you know, when Channel 7 puts the camera up out on Route 2A, it will pan this way, and there's your facility, pan that way, and it's a school. And that's not going to work. And I think that in any event, it needs to be measured away from the property line and not from the location where the building is. Another issue regarding the cultivation site is that some communities have, I think we have to look at the provision that the Attorney General has put as sort of an escape clause in some bylaws that she has approved elsewhere. And in one community, they amended the description of agricultural use to essentially exclude medical marijuana, to say, and she approved that bylaw, but with the proviso that said, essentially, if a court decides otherwise, if a court says that because you can't restrict commercial agricultural zoning, or you can't restrict the use through zoning, that and the standard is, you know, at least 5 acres or at least 2 acres with the area in productive use or whatever. So by whatever test it's measured, there's the possibility that even if we wrote a language to try to exclude it as an agricultural use, at some later point, the judge is going to say, well, sorry, it's not, it does count as agriculture. I think that literally the jury's out on that. We don't know what the answer is. But I think we want to be mindful of it. And the third thing that I'd mentioned, just that the one other site that I was approached about was the property on the other side of the railroad track next to the commuter rail station that had been occupied by Egg Rock. That was the third site that had been identified. So I think it's important as you try to look at, you got to ask where in town would it be okay, because you cannot exclude it everywhere. You have to allow it somewhere. So I think that it would be important to figure out, well, if you had to accept the use, where would you put it? And I have to say that with all of the dealings that I had, I heard zero support for the use anywhere, and for those few comments that we got, either emails or public comment or whatever, it was opposed to the use. So on the chair's basic question, if you want to promote it or not, I'm sure you can make your own judgment, but just based on the input that has been coming to me and to our office, haven't seen any support at all for the use. Although we do have to find some place where it could be allowed, because if you don't write a bylaw and limit it to some particular place, if we fail to bring a bylaw amendment to town meeting, if we fail to have one passed, then it will be allowed throughout town.
Have you heard of restricting the amount of area of this? Is there anybody that's tried to restrict the amount of land that you would qualify for use? In other words, have some towns designated a half-acre area in their town, or a quarter-acre area in their town? An area that's actually so small that it would be not economically viable.
It'd probably be challenged in court.
I have not heard that, towards that particular end, that I have heard examples in Concord, for example, that they've zoned areas that are in parts of town where they're okay, because there are other medical facilities, and that they're okay if someone wanted to put a dispensary there. I think the issue that we're gonna find, that we're dealing with mostly is cultivation sites. Not that we won't get an application for a dispensary. We certainly have to be careful in crafting it, but I think in our
Doesn't
case.
cultivation have to occur indoors? No. He's saying cultivation could be an open ground, unprotected?
Indoors.
Indoors.
He's saying no, you're saying
By
yes.
It used to grow
Inside.
wild in Massachusetts. It was used in the sailing industry, and it was grown outdoors.
No, I'm talking about the law. The way the law is written, you can't grow it, out in a
Yes.
field. You have to grow it in an enclosure. It has to be protected.
But can I ask, first of all, and I hate to say it, this is supposed to be a joint meeting, are we posted as a joint meeting?
Yes.
Who's posting? Because I looked on the,
Right there, if you want a copy of it.
okay, no, I was just concerned about that. And if that's the case, then we should be opening up our board.
Yeah, I thought everybody did that at 8:45.
Yeah, well,
When we started.
we never close.
We never closed, we never opened. So I'm opening the meeting, the joint meeting at 8:57. I have a comment to make, excuse me.
Go ahead.
In the reg, the DPH reg, it's very explicit in terms of how it is to be grown, the security procedures, the growing procedures, et cetera, the structural, all of that. So it's got to be indoors,
Like, so my suggestion would be to
under lock and key,
push it off to the industrial.
away from the site.
Which is,
Put it in
put it
industrial,
in the warehouse.
put it in expensive property in there, inside in a warehouse, keep it away from the neighborhoods.
I'd like to make a suggestion in terms of distance, about a mile from schools or public recreation in terms of parks.
Okay.
A mile. Littleton's big enough, we can handle that. It limits the different
You said
sites.
park, meaning all fields too, like Corper, soccer field? Kerper?
Don't fix the O.
Kerper?
Thank you.
That,
A suggestion.
Any
Just-
place
No,
you
If you
can
do that,
might
then that
bring
puts
up
out
these,
Middlesex materials.
Yeah.
that would knock out
Everything.
all the way to the line.
Yeah, you can't do that, but at least a mile from the schools and a mile from the,
Actually, when we did the adult entertainment, we wanted it to go in the industrial where Middlesex was. I think that's the place that we zoned it for it, so.
No, that's what I'm saying,
it
if
could
you
be
say a
down Arrow
mile.
Road. I mean, there's a lot of space down Arrow Road. I mean, there's a lot of different areas that just,
Now, if you
high
make it a mile
speed
from
and,
Kerber,
well,
Right, because the regulation says schools are places where children congregate, so any sports field would preclude that. And
Yeah.
if you put down daycare centers, if you say a mile, all of Littleton's knocked out.
I would say schools and parks, that would just be a suggestion. Because I think there are some areas, I don't know where
Schools and
Riverfield
recreation.
is.
You're not going to get a mile. 1,000 feet is more along the line?
Yeah,
Is that what
1,000
you
feet.
suggested also?
From the
So-
zones, if we could consider all of Russell Street a zone, school zone, so it'd be 1,000 feet from the
You
zone.
could do a half a mile. You could,
So-
I don't think 1,000 feet's enough in Littleton, given the space where the schools are and the different fields we have. I don't think that's enough.
I think you'd have to map it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I
So it's
haven't looked
gonna,
at it,
so
that's
are we safe in assuming we're gonna put it in industrial, industrial A?
Yeah, you could limit it that way.
Industrial A.
You could create a new zone.
that gives you what, Foster Street and,
That's
Air
gonna be
Road.
big.
Air Road,
Part of Air Road.
Down by,
I don't know where that field
119.
is.
119.
Taylor Street. Taylor
But
Street.
that goes down to Taylor Street.
It has to be
Street.
within 1,000 feet of the police station.
We could say, why don't we say it has to be on municipally owned land?
By the
We have
power
to rent
lines
it
where
from
they're
the
going to put
town.
that synagogue in
At
Groton.
least, that only leaves the police
No, it's
station,
not
behind the
synagogue,
police
it's a-
station.
Temple.
It was Temple.
Yeah,
They,
put it
they'd
behind the
like
police
that stuff
station.
going in their backyard.
All right, so is that how we wanna go? We wanna go as restrictive as we possibly can on it.
Well, I think, map it out. We need one of
You get a
crayon
GIS.
GIS
Yeah,
maps. just to-
we've even got we have the zoning map now loaded on the GIS.
So we could take a look at that. I think that would be very helpful.
Well, we can look at all districts, we can't look at each one separately.
Yeah.
You could also
Make
do
sure
it
it's in the
tiered.
water
You don't have to do it straight across the board, a certain amount of feet. You could do so-and-so feet or mile or half mile, whatever, from schools and, 1,000 feet from playing fields or whatever. You don't have to do it straight across.
And the zoning bylaw does not have to match whatever Board of Health regulations come up with. You can.
But we don't deal with zoning, so.
But you'll probably have some distances in your regs.
no.
Vera, you had a question, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you are planning to do similar regulations with regard to alcohol in town?
Let's start with pot.
Just pot?
For right now, that's the only issue we have right now. The alcohol is controlled because of licensing.
You're talking about breweries, distilleries?
I mean, right now,
Brewers, distilleries, dispensaries?
I think you can, there's legitimate use of.
At the moment, marijuana is a restricted substance. It's controlled. In fact, you can't use it. It is still, in certain places, including Massachusetts, I'm not incorrect on this, it's against the law to consume it.
Federally.
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 Okay.
A few states have.
So what we're really talking about here is trying to find a site for a tightly regulated, and I know this is ironic, biotechnology center. This one happens to be devoted to the production of a particular kind of quasi-medicinal substance. All right? So if we're going to spend the time and effort creating a zoning effort for medical use of pot, are there any other biotech companies around that could, as it were, enter this zone as well? After all,
I think it's fine now.
We don't have to, we're not gonna get anywhere.
Joe.
I see.
And we also talked about the dispensaries too, because I'm kind of concerned about that. When we do this bylaw, will it include cultivation and the
dispensing?
Can we split it?
Shouldn't we should have one for growing and one for selling.
Right, that's what I'm saying,
This just sounds so wrong.
What's the
Grow it one place, but
Yeah.
if you're gonna sell it,
Problem is, the law doesn't differentiate that,
It
MDPH
doesn't?
doesn't. But, we can be more restrictive, that's what they do allow you to do, as long as you don't conflict with what they have said. But they are wrapping both into one, because they realize some places will have a storefront behind where it's being cultivated.
Are you sure we can be more restrictive?
In terms of,
The state law?
Yes.
Yes.
yes, and if we choose to separate it out, we can be more restrictive in that sense.
Okay.
It's the definition of a bio.
Mr. Castaneri.
Yeah.
The DPH regulations don't
What I
specify
have
where
read,
they,
what
other
I
than
have read thus far says the emphasis is on the registry of the marijuana dispensary, but there is little or none that I see that requires a physician under a medical order to order the substance when it's needed by a person who qualifies. I think that there should be more prescriptive orders from medical physicians when this comes about, instead of other people okaying it at these registered marijuana distributors.
That was fine.
It has to be
prescription only.
approved card.
Yes, but in medical use, it does not say it requires, I read it thoroughly. It does not say it I think he's requires. talking about your right up there.
Yeah, my reg is just in addition to what
Yeah,
the
I know.
state has.
I understand.
So I don't deal with that, but that's in the state reg.
Yeah. Well, what I read, what was given to me, didn't show physicians as a requisite.
Yeah. In here.
When we first discussed this and discussed what would be the benefits to the town of Littleton in permitting cultivation, it seemed to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there were no income streams that could come from it because they're run by nonprofits. There were no huge fees we could levy onto the businesses, and that from a financial perspective, there's really nothing in it for Littleton money-wise to permit it. So to take the, to write a bylaw that permits it in a limited area could make it perhaps unsavory enough that people would decide not to come and have these things grow, and have cultivation sites here. So that's one thought that I had. Another thing is that when Keith mentioned that the Attorney General had this escape clause where agricultural use could specifically restrict it, I'm curious to know if you're aware, did those towns have the right to farm bylaw as a component of their town's policies? Because my concern is that right to farm has a different feel than just having agricultural use as something on the books in a town that perhaps isn't as agriculturally steeped as we are.
I don't know what the answer to that is, and maybe the larger question is, as a practical matter, as a legal matter, what is the significance of being having a general bylaw that says you're a right to farm now, that as it relates to this issue, and I'm not sure that it has.
Right to farm commercially on any lot, is that what that?
Right to farm, period.
Well, no, but right to farm on your property for your own consumption, or right to farm to sell?
I believe it relates to both.
That's what I'm asking.
Right.
So, and then that would then by association mean you'd have the right to grow pot?
Right, with a permit from the state saying that you're one of the 35 this year and maybe one of the 5 next year, or however they're going to dole out their permits.
So if I own my own private lot and I had 20 acres, I could farm, right to farm on my lot?
If
right?
DPH were to give you a permit.
If you get a permit from DPH.
But we don't have a right to farm.
You're not gonna,
You're saying medical marijuana, or you're saying lettuce?
No, I'm saying, do we have a right? I don't.
Yes. We do have a right to farm
Never-
marijuana, yes.
It's not a zoning bylaw, it's a general
So you can
bylaw.
slot in under the right to farm.
But we don't know yet. The state may come back and say,
So
we
is
can't zone it out
is
because
somebody
it's a right to
exploring that
farm.
in the state?
No, I guess my thought was, because we had this overarching bylaw that talks about this right to farm, would it be the case that someone could come in and make the argument that we have already sort of welcomed that idea, and by doing so, they have a bigger bite at the potential apple than a town that doesn't have right to farm?
Do that?
I want to hold the right to farm bylaw up against the regs and take a closer look at it, but it's my understanding that the right to farm bylaw is a general bylaw, and anything we do in the zoning bylaw should be regarded as separate from the right to farm. Again, I want to look at it a little bit more closely, but if we adopt a generally prohibitory zoning bylaw, I think that would rule the day. So I'd want to look at it more closely. But
I mean,
think
as a practical matter, I think you'd say, sure, you have a right to farm, and you can do it here.
Right. A right to
Not
farm.
anywhere, you can do it.
I've read a substantial amount of the material over and over, and I think one thing that has to be done, the selectmen should absolutely utilize the town council reviewing this thoroughly prior to.
For those who are watching on TV, you're our town council.
Christine, town council.
Can I respond to Jenna's first comment? In fact, the Board of Health could, if we choose to provide a permit or require a permit, both for the workers at the RMD or the site itself. But it would be small. It wouldn't be a large fee on top of what the state's already charging.
So is it safe to assume that we want to constrict this as much as we can? So what we should do now is take the industrial pieces of land, put the overlay as to how far away they are from the schools, from the ball fields and everything else, to get an idea of how many potential sites we have, and then start working that way forward to see if we have to make it more restrictive, if we want to knock more places out, then maybe we'll make the distances
Pigeonhole it
further.
into its smallest point possible, and no one's going to
Exactly,
want to
so
go
that
into
we,
that swamp.
I think we all agree that this is not, while we have to, by law, we have to do it, we want to make it as restrictive as we possibly can. Yes, Ted?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll concur what Keith said, and what we've all heard is that overwhelmingly, the response that we've gotten is against this. There are a few that have spoken up that they are for it, and I just want to speak on, on the behalf and state that's been said, state that we have heard back some people in support. And I myself, I just want to say that I'm in support of any business that wants, any legal business that wants to come in and invest in Littleton. And there may not be benefits to us financially, but to some of the people who are already here, such as people who own properties and who own empty buildings, who own empty storefronts, to allow people to get in there. So anybody who wants to come and invest in Littleton with a legal business, I would be in support of hearing what they have to say. I just want to say that, and it appears that we're going down that more restrictive, and I think you've already acknowledged that, so I appreciate that. I don't really have much other to say, except that there is people who support this, and that, I'm for hearing from any legal business that wants to invest in Littleton. So,
Just
thank
as
you.
a point of clarity, we may not be able to tax the sale of property, we can still tax the value of the building, commercial property.
Of course, of course.
So,
Yeah.
if vacant properties are used for pod cultivation and that raises their land value, then we would benefit from that tax.
No, it doesn't.
Sure it does.
Why?
If they increase the value of their property by
Fixing it up, yeah, but if it's still,
You're assessing.
the way that they assess, we should get the assessors, but they do it square foot price, boom, 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 what section is it in? They don't care if it's painted pretty or it's ugly.
Actually, what
They do.
I asked an assessor one time when we were talking about hotels and, what was gonna go into certain properties, and the thing that he did say, Ken Nolan did say, is it's all based on, he's basically said it's based on finish. So if you put in a Hyatt, they're gonna pay more, they're gonna pay a higher tax. Their property's gonna be valued higher than a Home Depot. So, but I think what you're talking about is very subtle changes if you're talking about an open place like Egg Rock, who comes in and now anyone comes in, that's not gonna you're not gonna raise it to a high level, but it is based on what describes the finish.
Because I asked up there once about, there was a house in particular on Goldsmith. One guy kept beautiful care of his house, the next guy didn't do a bloody thing, and it was a dump. They said, this is worth 150, that's worth 150. I says, how is that so?
Yeah.
She goes, because it's square footage, that's square footage, same square footage, same size lot, everything. So I said, you're gonna buy this house for 150,000, and you're gonna buy that house? Well, I wouldn't pay that for that.
Yeah.
Well, it's a piece of junk. I said, but you're telling me it's worth 150, but I wouldn't pay it. Well,
Well, we gotta talk to the assessor, maybe commercial, residential is all done differently. That's just what I was told when we were talking about commercial properties.
Right, but assessors use, and as Jen has pointed out, most of these groups are nonprofit.
They have to be nonprofit.
So that's the use.
so that takes them off the tax roll?
Profit.
Totally?
Period, yeah.
Well, we don't tax
But the
profit here
property.
anyway. We only tax property. It's not like we don't tax income
property
tax.
tax is what we're talking
No,
about.
right, yeah.
We're not
Yeah,
taking
it's profit.
So whether profit or non-profit, it's gonna be the same effect on the property, right?
If they're increasing the value and doing improvements to a structure, it's gonna increase the property tax.
No, we just want to, because I'd like to segue into something very quickly while we have both boards right here.
Oh, one more question while we're still on this.
Okay.
Chris, is it possible to quarry these guys or put into our bylaw that they need to be quarried?
They all have to be quarried.
Oh, they do?
They all have to be quarried.
Okay.
And can I just make
My
one
question.
last comment on this? This is a very controversial issue. There is a lot of medical documentation that certain people for certain illnesses really do need this, and that's fine. And I think if that's the spirit that we're putting this into play in Littleton, that's great. For the people that are targeted, that need it, that want it, whatever, but make sure that those that don't need it, shouldn't have it, whatever, don't. I think I'm behind whatever you do.
And
I
Talk to the
think that's
doctor.
the spirit of it.
And
Talk
at
to
the
the
general
doctor.
election, this town did vote the law in. I mean, the majority of the folks in town did.
Go ahead, Ted.
Thank you. I just want one more input. I'll promise after this, I'll be quiet about this. I think if I were writing this regulation, I would try to write it so that it is specific to Littleton, so that we're not rewriting mass regs. We're gonna write it, so we're gonna talk about distances. We're not gonna rewrite a 30-page document of regulations. For the Board of Health has their issues, but I think it should be strictly how it applies to Littleton and how we want to zone it. That's all.
Do we want to schedule another meeting for the 13th of February as well? Maybe we could have some rough draft stuff done by then?
So you'd like me to put together a
Absolutely, yes.
look at?
You need help with the GIS part, right?
We want to see maps too.
Right, we're gonna get maps and-
How many decisions are made? We want to see
We can work
we
with.
definitely want to see maps and take a look at what was happening.
The one layer I'd add is that wherever we do identify as a proper acceptable location for this use, you probably want to make it a special permit at that location rather than a by right.
Right,
So
special permit.
we'll lay on top of that
One other
property
thing,
a set
too.
of special permit
Should
requirements.
we be concerned about aquifer water resource, since this is gonna put a chemical into the groundwater, even though it's inside a building, correct? Can we use that as layering as well?
Yeah, what
How do you
chemical?
filter it in a way that
think they
Yeah.
call it
Sorry,
We can make that a special permit requirement.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So,
Half the
I'm just
reg
saying, we have
is-
aquifer water.
It is Shouldn't the conservation be part of it, because they are growing stuff? Not that I know of.
Oh, it's very
Okay.
Oh, I know, it's all.
All right, can I,
Yeah.
go ahead, one more.
Chairman, it's specifically laid out in the reg, the state reg, as to how the state would like it to be grown in terms of
It's not.
the methodology, how they're going to destroy the product once it's no longer viable, et cetera.
Is it hydroponically grown? Or no?
I don't know, it maybe could be, but I'm not an agriculturist, so I can't
Yeah, I
answer
don't
that.
think
No, it's not, it
I
can't
don't
be hydro, it's in a pot with dirt.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
That's why it's on pot.
All right, Paul. All right, one last, I wanna, since we're talking about revenue and income and what the town gets and everything else, I've made the Board of Selectmen aware that, the tubing park in that Littleton that we approved, 1999, appears to be a lot larger and in violation of your special permit that you granted back there and our site plan. And I'd like the opportunity to both boards to work together and with the Fletchers to come up with something that maybe makes a little more sense, is a little more equitable to the town, since they're in violation, that we could, you know, especially given the site plan that we saw earlier today, that maybe guarantees that that land stays as open space and things like that, and maybe the joint boards together could sit down, because I think if you look at everything that was presented to you, you're gonna notice that at the very least, they're in violation of this special permit. They have expanded, they have made it quite bigger, and they're in violation of our site plan at the very least as well. So I'd like the opportunity of both boards to work together to come up with something that would be,
Yeah, we got their letter late this afternoon.
Haven't had a chance to even look at it.
Yeah, we're going to have it in the selectmen's reading packet for Monday night, and we can, I'm sure, schedule a meeting to discuss.
But to get back to what Richard said, and I think Mr. Scott said about the original intent of their plans, you know, you've been stonewalling them for 4 years, Mark.
absolutely have
You've been stonewalling them for 4 years, and, you know, you forced them into a housing development, and, you know, I think the town should know and make a decision on whether or not they want a sports complex with a couple restaurants and some light retail and a small office building, and keeping that vista wide open, as they've always stated, so.
were you not there when everybody? And I'm
No,
not-
that was not, that was about the open recreation bylaw, Mark. That was the farmers saying, you're taking 70% of my money
That's what
away.
it's all about.
That's what that was about. It had nothing to do with the plan that has been before this board, and we've seen it, I've sat in a meeting with you, where you said, geez, we can work with that. And then they come before you, and it's like, I've never seen this before. So, you know, it's disheartening, as Richard said earlier, that we've forced these folks into more housing. That's gonna increase the number of housing, that's gonna bring that 10% 40B even closer. You know, and when do we hit that under 10%? And then we're hoping for another 40B based on this. And you got some other big subdivisions coming in
They've
town.
had every opportunity to come in and have their land rezoned.
You're absolutely correct.
And it
But
came
with you stonewalling them, time and time, yeah, it's you, Mark. Time and
Yes, it
time
was you,
again,
Mark.
time and time again,
You and you
they
alone.
get frustrated, and now we end up with homes. That's
9
the point.
houses?
So we should,
If we were gonna do this, we should have done it in parallel to doing the
I agree.
rec bylaw. But nobody wanted to do that.
the what?
I
What
offered,
bylaw?
you're wrong, absolutely wrong.
What bylaw?
At the night that we decided to go down the recreational bylaw, I asked, and I pointed out that we should go and revitalize
All the
the
boards
overlay.
were there.
and-
Did everybody else, did all the other boards
No,
agree?
this is back in May, And Mark says, no, we're not gonna go that way, we're gonna go this way. And it was designed for failure.
And it was met with the Fletchers, they're the ones who
Just
crafted
to
it.
be clear, I mean, that's a contested part of town. So you gotta go on the floor.
Absolutely.
You gotta go on the floor, and you gotta guarantee that
Absolutely.
you win 2/3 to get it.
Absolutely,
And if you
Jeff.
lose, you're done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
You're
that's-
absolutely
but
correct.
at least the townspeople
Get it to the floor.
have a
It's never
chance.
been there. You've never had a public hearing about that plan.
We most certainly have.
Yeah.
You even
Not
heard
the-
Doug say.
Not an overlay.
Not the overlay,
No, you
plain old rezoning of it,
You have not.
pure and simple.
You have not.
Mark,
You have not.
the reason they pulled the zoning is because we were
They
going
had
to
no
work with them.
support.
My
And
point
we
for
didn't
bringing
work with
that
them.
up is, my point for bringing that up is because you made a good point. While we're talking about the Fletcher property as two boards, let's talk about the entire Fletcher property. Exactly. Let's talk about what if there is anything else we can do to, to get that property developed the way the townspeople want it.
Well, let's talk about the
Okay.
overlay. Let's talk about.
I'm not talking about the overlay, because when you start talking about the overlay, then you get the Cooper property involved, and then you get the
Exactly.
Okay, I agree. Then you won't get that in support. But when you're talking about the piece of property that the Fletchers own, and they come before town meeting with a specific plan, and there's a public hearing that they'll be able to give that plan out if the planning board says we'll have a public hearing on it, then the town has the right to say, you know what, we don't want that development as a town. 2/3 say no, or we can't get the 2/3 approval, let's build houses.
So what bylaw?
That's all I'm saying.
What bylaw?
I'm
do
not
you
talking about a
recommend?
bylaw.
How can we develop that land without going under a bylaw?
Because you can have them go before town meeting and ask for a zoning change. They need 2/3 vote.
Just for their property?
Yes.
They've had,
Isn't that kind of spot zoning?
they've tried to do it twice.
We do?
Sure.
When was the last time we did that?
Because there was no support, it was dropped
I
at
don't
town
have
meeting
examples
floor, there was
right now,
no
Jerry, but you can
support.
look it up.
They brought it all the way to town meeting floor and decided not to
Rezone
proceed.
never brought it to the town
153
meeting.
acre lot?
Yes, they did. They were
Yes, they
I
did.
was part of that in the original, when they brought it to the town meeting, I was one of the ones that walked up with you and asked them to withdraw it, so we, as a town, could examine and try to help them through this. It wasn't the case that they got there and just pulled it, it was through our advice, the advice
They
of
had no
the town.
support. We held public hearings and nobody in the room, we packed the room with over 100 people on these meetings, and not one person voted, talked in favor of it years
So you
ago.
let 100 people decide
8
for the
years
town?
ago.
What
wait.
When they came before it
No,
for
but to
public
be fair,
hearing.
right, you hold a hearing, everybody comes in, nobody speaks in favor.
For every-
That's the board sampling. That doesn't mean
Exactly.
you're speaking for the town. It's a sample.
That's the sampling. Everybody comes in and say, no, we don't want to support it. So then 5 people have to make a decision, and all 5 people voted not to support it, not just me, everybody. This has been gone through twice. The Fletchers tried to
I mean,
rezone it
personally, I
twice.
was a little shocked by the landowners that came and the sort of,
Can
how
I
they
address
viewed
that?
that bylaw. I was,
In
Can I
October this
address
year?
that?
yeah, go ahead.
We had, when that came out on the agricultural commission, we asked the large landowners, anybody that held over a certain amount of acreage, and I think it was 40 or 50 acres, to come in, to get their idea, most of them were farmers, that's why we did it, to come in and sit down with us and see what they thought of that proposed bylaw change or whatever you.
Special permit.
Yeah, special permit. And they were, like, simply guessed that the town would ask somebody for 70% of their property.
That's
Now,
a
wait a
big
minute, let
argument.
me finish up.
Finish, yeah.
That's the way it was presented. There was no clear-cut thing that said 70 acres was gonna be theirs to do what they want with. The whole idea was to go to the town. That's the way it was read. That's why those people, I wasn't here for that.
Yeah.
But that's why those people were so angry when they came down. It wasn't at the Fletchers, it was at the particular bylaw.
Right, but just that special permit was developed by a lot of people in this room. So, I mean, it's not the planning board that set the terms for that.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
So, I mean, and the way, I didn't like the way it was presented, because to me, it wasn't, all we were simply saying, if you were gonna utilize that special permit, it was a swap. You got 30% commercial, you gave the 70%, would never be developed as commercial. That wasn't a taking.
It wasn't a
Right,
taking,
right,
it
and
was
that's
never a
the- right,
taking.
And that was
So
really,
that was
that was an
unfortunate.
unfair interpretation.
Very
And
unfair.
the problem is, even when people were told that it wasn't that way, I mean, I was at a different
Yeah.
hearing, I was at the final hearing, people, they just weren't
They
getting
weren't
off
getting
that rock.
that point.
Yeah.
It was never a taking. It was gonna be left as it was, as residential land. They got 30% to do commercial, and the rest stayed just like it was. 70% is residential. That's what it was. They were getting a bonus.
That,
And
no,
they didn't
that's
say
not,
it.
what you're just saying is not right.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. The 70% left is not residential.
It was left in.
It's not to be developed residential, it's to be
Right.
left alone.
It was gonna be-
Actually, see, you said that a few times, you said things that you left out the one part that really meant a lot. It's not left residential, it's left as open space.
Open
And our problem with it is that when everyone showed up, the farmers, they again looked at it because your wording, honestly, Mark, was skewed, and they misconstrued what you said. You
But they
weren't,
could
I'll
meant to
finish and then I'll let you talk, because
Go ahead.
so, that's how it went that way. And again, when I spoke to a gentleman afterwards, each lot has its own entity. 70 here, 50 there, 60 there, whether it's up on Harvard Line or on, Danny Pickard's or.
Right, you've already done the 30%.
Yeah, so there you go, all right? So if that be the case, each one should have been taken at a different form of percentage, so the farmer had an opportunity to save land for the town and make his money.
Right, the point-
That's how it should have been done.
The point was that
But
the
we never
farmer
got
could
there.
continue to farm the 70%, just like he was doing now. He didn't have to change a thing. He could take that 30%.
Pass that to those people?
Yes, absolutely. They
Well,
kept
not
it.
one of them
they-
thought that's what you
They
said.
kept it as they wanted it.
No,
They
that
were the
was
farmers.
interpreted.
Anyway, that's not the debate right now.
Let's
Misunderstood. You're entirely true, because what they didn't understand is that they were gonna get benefit. If they didn't wanna use the bylaw, they could still have the land, and no one was taking it, and they just didn't understand that one part. So that's where the arguments come up, and everyone got excited, and that's why some people didn't speak anymore, because I'm friends with all the farmers, and I wasn't gonna say a word during that meeting.
So let's not talk about the past, all right?
Exactly.
The past,
Yeah.
where are we going from here with this?
So it looks like there was a big misunderstanding. So maybe the impression that this board got at that day had a problem, was incorrect.
Well, the problems were much more than the large landowners. Across the board, everyone was against it. I think even the Fletchers were against it.
And they wrote
I don't
it.
think anyone was.
Look,
Yeah.
Yeah, and they helped
Well,
out.
was there something where we can get a variable in there and somehow get it working, and we want to revitalize it and try and get it for May?
But the point is, right now, what we have in front of us is a 9-lot subdivision, which is not that bad if we can preserve the open space.
Well, take another bite at the apple. You
Yeah.
want to why not put the rec
But they
bylaw
don't
in
want
front of
it.
the town as it was written?
Yeah, because they don't want.
They don't want to.
And also, there's now the exposure that, Peter mentioned that I live across the street from Jim and Eleanor Pickard. Well, are they gonna put a mini mart there now? I don't want a mini mart across the street.
You might not
Right,
want, but they
because-
could go there anyways. Who's gonna shop there?
But the
No,
point
but they
that I'm
could
trying to
develop
make is that if we revitalize something for a recreational use bylaw, and they stick, a mini mart in with next to mini golf, now I bought residential, well, my parents bought residential land that I live on. I look across the street and I see something that I never thought was going to be there. So when you think about revitalizing it in order to appease the Fletchers, we have lots of large landowners who have residential land that perhaps was agriculturally zoned, that they now would, agricultural restriction, that they now perhaps have this new recreational use bylaw, and then we've got little, mini golf and mini marts everywhere, which is not what a butters had
You said
thought.
recreational or
See, you talk about retail.
See, a
townwide
solution is not the answer to this.
Thank you.
What's that?
Townwide solution is not the answer to this.
But
exactly
but then we have to,
So
on the other hand, it's
we take a
spot zoning.
project by project.
But do we get into spot zoning now?
It is
What,
spot
what,
zoning.
what is this evil word, spot zoning? Why is it?
It's illegal.
We have town council right here who can help
But
us.
listen,
No, that's town
We have
council.
town council here.
the issue is not really spot zoning. I mean, it isn't.
Well, I think
We
it's
spot
away from it. We
zoned
gotta make sure we
the
stay away from
west
it.
side, the
Yeah.
north side of 119, didn't we?
Counselor?
town council. I think.
Didn't we?
How can we do this, Chris?
Rezoning one parcel certainly can make a town vulnerable to an attack of what you've done as spot zoning.
Right.
But it's not clear cut. What the town cannot do is use its zoning power exclusively for the benefit of a landowner, for the economic benefit of one landowner. Can't do that. But it gets a little bit less clear if there is a valid planning objective being brought to bear on the parcel. So it's not, I'm not going to say that it's going to be per se spot zoning if the town were to select one parcel and rezone it. It could be. That's a court fight.
If you don't want to do in the area C, which maybe gets too big, maybe you go back and look at area A and expand it.
Right.
And add whatever use you want, which you can see, because so much of the rest of area A is or developed.
He's already here.
But it's not gonna get around the
No, I'm
problem.
not talking about, well, area, I'm sorry, actually, Area A is not the overlay. Area A is the
zone.
the Littleton Common Zoning District. So you'd have, but the procedure is the same. You could spread it over for, to capture whatever lot, and then take a look at whether those allowed uses.
And then you're gonna have
allow you to
Danny
do what you
Pickton,
wanna
you're
do.
saying the same thing you said at the last meeting, saying you do this for the Fletchers, but you won't do it for me. I mean,
Exactly.
That's where the exposure comes.
that's where it comes from.
You know-
That's the problem, trying to do that.
But that's a risk, and the benefit, though, is an indoor sports complex and things for kids. There is benefit.
Kids like marijuana as well.
Anyway, the point is, that we have the subdivision.
How would you
So
know?
when you suggest
way to combine
I'd
it.
rather-
Let's just
I'd rather
wanna-
see this-
But the key
take the special
that
permit.
town council said was, there's a benefit, right? I mean, there's a benefit for the town, an open vista, there's a benefit for the town for that property. And that's what I was trying to get to as far as, it's not spot zoning, because the town is gonna benefit to get all this property.
But we are
The only problem with that plan, and this is the thing we couldn't overcome with the Fletchers, was in order to get the retail component, it had to have access, visual access to the road, which meant that lot, that farm lot was gonna get dug up.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yes.
was.
If you remember, it was on one end, on the other end,
That's
where the
right.
house
Down the
is.
hill, it was gonna go
Where
down the hill with the.
where the house is right now, the farmhouse, and the old flag house, that's where the entrance was gonna go, and it's gonna go down to where that's the cul-de-sac of the left.
Everything from Robinson Road across was
But
gonna
the
be.
retail part was gonna be up front by the road.
Right.
That's where the flag property is, that's
No.
where it
All the way
That's
to the
not what
road.
he was
It was
showing.
going all the way to the road.
Well, again.
Again, it's
and
where-
let's move where we're going. Let's-
Exactly, why are we
we're
dealing with the ancient history?
Can we get something back before the townspeople in
I say
in
we
May?
put the special permit out, the recreation. permit.
No, the Fletchers don't even wanna do it, this is what they want.
What
They've
do they
come,
want?
they wanna do the 9 houses.
Yeah, the applicant has to submit what they want.
They don't wanna come, but you heard them, they didn't wanna reopen.
He does.
Not after dealing with you for 4 years, can you
Oh,
believe it?
God, give me a
come on,
break,
that's-
give me a break, Jimmy.
That's not fair.
Give me a freaking break, will
I think
you?
another important piece of this is we have a master plan that's 12 years old, and I know that one of our goals is to update that. A lot of what we're talking about is what do we want for Littleton can be put into a master plan if we take some Littleton funds and put it behind hiring a consultant to help us draft something which is both protective of our vision of our town here on our 300th birthday.
The only thing I would point out is that consultant that spoke with that special permit, he brought a lot of ideas, I'm not saying they were bad, but it doesn't overcome this sort of yin yang you get into every time you flip a special permit, where if the special permit applies to all qualifying lots in Littleton,
Right.
you could have a mini mart across the street from you
Right.
if you live next to a 70-acre farm. It never eliminates that.
If you permit an extensive recreational use bylaw.
Or you do what he's saying, is
Wait a
just
minute,
try
wait a
to
minute, what he
spot
said.
zone, or, not spot zone, but selectively zone a lot
That benefits the town.
that benefits the town. We would have to come up with a really good argument, but we'd be vulnerable to challenging court. That's all I'm saying. There's a yin and a yang to everything we try.
The study could could look not just at new special permit procedures that would apply to the whole town, but adjustment to zone lines, bumping them out two lots. So making regulations specific to one lot, not all agricultural.
If it would give us, whatever option would give the boards the most control.
Interesting, because I think if I understand you correctly, Jenna, we could, and you too, Chris, we could, if we looked at the old, the town as a whole, and then possibly extended the commercial zone, not along the street, but along the back area where they were gonna put that sports complex, then that would satisfy the ability to get a sports complex back there while leaving that field in the front absolutely preserved, because we're not gonna touch that.
Can
You're
you
carving
split
the
up?
land up.
Can you split the same property like that? Zone it?
Zone lines
You can
can,
run zone lines through a lot.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Then that does That's a way of using the town, looking at the town bylaws as a whole, and
But I thought the
expanding just
whole
a small
idea was-
portion of it.
Each lot has its own engineering challenge. If you do that, you could be boxing somebody into, great, you got your back commercial, but it's completely unbuildable.
But in their case, it's very buildable.
So we're
did you
gonna
read the
be a
geology
butcher
report?
to every
They have
person's
spotted
got an
salamanders. They
individual.
haven't
I
even-
don't know if it's that gold.
Take the back straps from one guy, give him the hose from
They
another
don't even
guy.
know if they could build this. They haven't even addressed the spotted salamander issue. They may lose most of those houses.
Actually, if you
We
read the
don't know.
geology report, he may not even be able to perk half of those homes.
The perk tests on most of that property were absolutely beautiful.
No, they weren't. They weren't done. The
It's
house,
only a small
Yeah, they
portion of
haven't,
the marginal.
didn't show the locations of the tests.
they
That
haven't.
is where it's going.
That's why they're
right?
doing this
This is
to
the
freeze
good
their
stuff.
zoning, so they don't
Right.
have to perk
And
the
this is
lots.
garbage.
But you see,
You know, this may never be built. We don't know. But the point is, this is not a bad alternative to what could go out there. 9 houses, we
And you
we
don't wanna-
preserve the frontage.
You're not in the hearing.
Oh, yeah, we're not in,
public
yeah,
hearing
we
for it.
really can't even be talking about this, actually.
Right.
They were not on TV, anyway.
But in
Um,
regards, I still think
Next on the agenda.
reestablishing the special
Wait a minute.
permit
That's it?
for future.
I thought we were gonna
if it's
address
not gonna
the,
work for
the
these
accessory
guys,
dwelling
for somebody
over here.
else.
Oh, you wanna-
We already did it.
Peter's last thing before he gets off the board is he would like to,
So you already predetermined my history, huh?
Wow, right? That's
we can barely get
Oh,
you
I
to the
never made
meeting.
no announcements. Well, he talks for all of us anyway, so what am I having for breakfast
Reader's
tomorrow morning?
Digest version,
Well, is
please.
that how you wanna go now?
Anyway,
You wanna hobble my
Mr.
mouth
Scott
after
would
letting that
like
one run
to
for 30 minutes?
address the
Kiss my ass.
accessory.
Before
Excuse me.
Mr. Scott does that, Mr. Chairman, can I just close out the Board of Health part
I
of
wasn't
this?
doing the kissing, sweetheart.
Please do.
Need a motion to
While you guys are still here, Mr. Scott would like to
Okay, thank you.
talk about going with the in-law apartment. Go ahead, Peter.
Are you, still in session? You are out?
We're not in
Jan,
session. I just closed our session.
Yes,
And
we're
you are not board of, you are not the selectman, correct? So the selectman is still in session?
We're done. We're no longer in
We have to
session.
close your session.
Here, give him your Reader's Digest version.
I made a motion.
To close?
But she seconded.
All in
Before
favor?
he spoke?
I haven't done a word, I'm just.
Go ahead.
The accessory dwelling, I would like to address it so that we can take some wordage out of it and make it more accessible for all the residents in town, or certain residents in town that would like to have called an accessory dwelling. We also call it the in-law apartment. The reason I wanted is to change it is because presently, in order to have one, it has to be, the person in one of the units needs to be either functionally dependent, or is one of them, or a blood relative, okay? So let's say your mother moves in, and at some point in time, she passes away. Now you've got an apartment that you can't rent to anybody or have anybody else live in it unless they are a blood relative or functionally dependent upon the other unit. That functionally dependent is a very broad term. I had a nanny in my own case living in my apartment, and I had to go in front of the board because they asked who was living in it, and I had to go to the Board of Appeals, and they decided that a nanny was not a function of my household. Though she spent the night, she had dinner with us, she got the kids in the morning. If my wife at the time and I went to work early in the morning, she was there to get them up, put them on the bus, feed them, everything, and stayed home with the youngest one. Well, that's not a function
You
of...
were functionally dependent on her. She wasn't functionally dependent on you.
And there it says, one needs to be functionally dependent on the other. It doesn't designate which. And it doesn't designate that the owner of the house has to live in the big house. They can live in the apartment. So, I want to take, the reason for that is it leaves interpretation to the people on the Board of Appeals. So whoever's, that is one I want to eliminate. And there was some, did you guys get any of the ones from Maren earlier? No, yes?
Oh,
About the accessory dwelling?
I haven't seen it yet.
Have we got it back in?
We have it.
She's taken a number of other towns throughout the state, and it's actually very good. There's just a few things that you need to pick out, is how big this, how many square feet can you add to this? There are regulations already in place that make it, you have to have parking spaces for it, it has to have its own egress. It cannot extend in front of the main house itself. The septic system obviously has to be withholded. So it's not something someone's going to throw up overnight.
Yeah.
It's going to be planning, it's going to be expensive to certain people, but it will allow, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of the elderly or children are moving out, that for somebody to stay in that house. And I used the example last time, I have a very large house. I have one child left living with me for the most part. When they move out, I have a 4-bedroom house and a 2-bedroom apartment attached to it. Who's going to move in? I'd love to stay there, but at $13,000 a year in taxes, it's getting a little heavy. So if I presently rent to my sister. What happens if she moves out? And then what do I do?
Well, it's not even that point, but who can you sell
My
it to?
kids.
Who can you sell it to?
Right, and then the sale is, again, nannies, a kid coming back from college. There's many opportunities for somebody to,
So you're looking to
What I want to say,
expand.
Pete, what I was trying to say, I'm glad you're doing it, it's long overdue. We had a housing committee, this probably dates back 10 to 12 to 13 years, that made that suggestion way back then, and nothing was done. I think it's a great idea for all the reasons that you just stated.
A portion of this came up to vote on town floor about 15 or 18 years ago. It missed passing by 7 votes.
How can we get this back on track to a town meeting?
Well,
We wanted it to,
we have
we have
one of our
time.
goals is to review bylaws, and I mean, this is a bylaw we can bring forward on that.
It's a zoning bylaw. I did a draft based on a model bylaw from the state. The model bylaw, right now, it's written so that any application would have to go to the appeals board, and if
Yeah.
it meets certain criteria. There's another way to do it, is that the building inspector could automatically approve it if it meets certain criteria, size criteria, that kind of thing. So, first decision is whether or not you want to move forward with it, and second decision is when you want to gather information about how to.
Well, that's why we wanted to ask the selectmen, do you want us to move forward on something like that for town meeting?
I'm in favor of it.
Yeah.
How you doing, Peter? One foot in front of the other.
All right, sounds like everybody's in favor of it, so.
Well, in favor of moving forward, I gotta see the.
Right.
first, and if it's, you're trying to open this up, Peter, right? You're trying to make it more
February
usable for more
13.
Not too
Yes,
bad.
you were going to look at Chris's work on medical
I'll see you
marijuana
down a little
bylaw. You can also
picture,
look
cut
at
down on your gambling.
And the biggest concern ends up being is, how large will you make it? Some are 30% the size of the main dwelling, not to exceed it, 900 square feet, not to exceed, 1 floor. One of them also has that there will never be more than 3 people living in the accessory dwelling, which is in one of these, which I like that. It could be, a husband and wife come back, your kids come back, they have 1 child. So it's not putting a giant burden on the school system, but you're allowed 3. I like that idea, to limit the number of people living in it. And I think it'll be self-regulatory in other areas too, because I'm not going to rent my apartment to 7 kids, or a bunch of little kids.
You're gonna finally get your kids out, and you're gonna rent in 3 more?
No, you're out.
Well, let's get something,
But can
someone
we
to
also
change,
put in a
why you want
financial
changes.
component of it, that you could use finances, like saying an elderly couple wants to stay in their house but needs to augment their income to pay the taxes and stuff, that could be a consideration of allowing the in-law apartment, so that it doesn't have to be functionally dependent on.
One of the stated purposes in the model that Aaron articulated.
Yeah, that's the thing I want to eliminate. Someone's interpretation of functionally dependent. Because if you read in the paper, read in the dictionary, it's not the way that certain people sit on boards.
Financially,
Huh?
financially dependent.
That's fine.
It can be, that can be another one of it, but I don't think it needs to be a determining factor of it.
But we gotta tweak it. We gotta tweak the bylaw.
Very,
So that's our.
and there's some are
that's our
already
plan for the 13th.
done and very well. Already done.
The draft
No
that I
writing.
threw
Just
together
read it.
is on the table.
Crossroads, or what do you think?
What are we talking about the master plan between the 2 boards? Also on the 13th of February?
Should be done, we should have bumped it to a before town meeting, because it was so loaded.
Well, this town meeting, the only thing that could happen was funding.
Right, you already have the
Schedule.
slot in for the money anyway, right? For the $100,000,
Well,
right?
it's in the
It's in there,
request,
it's in there.
it's in the request, no decisions have been made about what projects are actually going to get funded.
Okay, can we do it for that? Because I heard it was more like $250,000 to do a proper one. I don't want to do sort of a wishy-washy
Well,
one.
I don't want to give a guy some money for doing nothing in the first place.
We're going to hire you, and now you're not hired. No $250,000 for you.
I'm out.
I think right now, $100,000 is a reasonable placeholder for us to have. we're working with MAPC on developing the proposed scope. I know I copied Maren on this, but just so you're aware, that we are updating the housing production plan, which is the document that Joe was talking about back in 2005, the Housing Committee came up with something. That plan expired in 2010. We want to make sure that we have one that's up to date. It's a $20,000 project scope. 10,000 of that 20 is coming from MAPC itself through their ELTA program. And frankly, that housing plan is sort of the housing component of a master plan as well. So we'll be making some steps there. But we do have a $100,000 placeholder capital plan. I think it would be well for us to talk, within a month about, have the two boards get together and talk about whether that's going forward or not.
It's worthwhile to mention, saying, well, maybe it'll cost more for a master plan. Our experience the last time through both we and Groton had the same firm, which is considered a good firm, do the master plan. It stalled or dragged out. Groton got fed up. They actually brought more money on board and completed it themselves. So that is a very legitimate concern, that if we want a good master plan, it may cost more. So maybe $100,000 initially, then
Well, it may
determine as
cost
we
more,
go.
and I would also like us to explore the option of having MAPC itself do the study, which they would like to do, and which they're prepared to, run that proposal. Yeah.
You should make sure it's a good plan, and realize it may cost more.
I think our experience with MAPC, and I'm still
It's been
on the
positive.
MAPC executive committee, but I can still say it, that the advantage to any community in the contract with MAPC is that they don't go away after they've done the plan, that you have a continuing, ongoing relationship with them, and it's not a consultant comes in, does the plan, does it it's on the shelves, and off they go, that they have the opportunity for continuing relationship with the.
Yeah, the problem last time was Shane does stall.
Continue to talk.
It stalled.
Yes, one second.
All there?
I stuck up for you once.
I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.